I still check the missed connections every few weeks. Not because I expect to see her name, but because I'm looking for the ad that finally explains it all. I'm looking for the person who put up the original post, the one that started the bidding war for a mahogany dining set that wasn't actually for sale. It started with a perfectly normal search. My fiancée, Sarah, and I had just moved into a small 1950s ranch house in suburban Denver, Colorado, and we were determined to furnish it with character, not particle board. I typed vintage dining table into Craigslist and found the listing. It was brief: antique dining set, mahogany, heavy, must bring help. $500 oboe. The address was only about 5 miles away, near a quiet, older neighborhood full of thick oaks and homes that had seen decades of mild winters. I called the number listed, a burner phone, I realized later, that only rang once before going straight to a full, silent voicemail box. I emailed the seller, a contact named It, and got an immediate, oddly formal reply. The item is available. Cash only. The first to arrive with payment secures the sale. The next day, a Sunday, I showed up at 9 a.m. sharp with a folded envelope of cash. The house was a dark brown split level, meticulously maintained but somehow lifeless. The only car in the driveway was an ancient, black sedan, covered in a thick layer of dust. I rang the bell. No answer. I knocked. Silence. I walked around to the backyard. That's when I noticed the other cars parked down the street. There were at least 5 of them, people sitting in their vehicles, all looking toward the same house. A few looked at me, not with curiosity, but with a strange, fixed intensity. I felt the first trickle of unease. I was supposed to be the first one here. I went back to the front door and knocked harder. This time, the door creaked open, just a few inches. Inside was a darkness that the small windows didn't dispel. A faint, cloying scent of mothballs and old wood hung in the air. "Hello?" I called out, pushing the door open a little wider. "I'm here about the dining set." The foyer was empty, but ahead, down a short hall, I saw a sliver of light from the dining room. I took a hesitant step inside. The silence of the house was not empty. It was pressurized, like the air was being held still by something heavy. I reached the dining room and froze. There was the mahogany table, exactly as pictured, enormous and dark, but around it, surrounding the table, like silent supplicants, were for other people. 2 men, 1 woman, and an elderly gentleman. They were all standing perfectly still, all looking at the table's surface. They had their wallets or envelopes of cash resting on the polished wood. One of the men, lean and wearing an expensive coat despite the mild weather, glanced at me, his eyes wide and glassy. "You're late," he whispered, his voice dry. "Late for what?" "I'm here to buy the table," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud. The other 3 didn't move. They stared at the wood. I walked closer, feeling the urge to grab the table, to stake my claim. I placed my envelope of cash down next to the others. "I've got the 500, I said, addressing the empty space above the furniture. The elderly man chuckled, a thin, papery sound. "It's not about the money, son." He pointed a shaking finger at the table's center. I finally looked down, properly. The tabletop wasn't empty. Etched into the dark, reflective wood, in what looked like hurried, fresh scratches, were 5 distinct names. My name Kevin was not among them. Beneath the names, a single word had been carefully carved, chosen. Then the floorboards upstairs groaned. A slow, heavy sound that was definitely not the settling of an old house. It was a single, deliberate footstep. All 5 of us looked up at the ceiling. The man in the expensive coat pointed to the names on the table and then, quickly, to the front door. I understood instantly. This wasn't a sale. It was an audition, a selection. As the sound of the heavy footsteps began to descend the stairs, the others started moving, not panicking, but shuffling with a terrible, desperate haste toward the exit. I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my envelope off the table, the feel of the cool, heavy air rushing past me as I ran. I reached the front door and burst outside, not looking back. I sprinted down the sidewalk and jumped into my truck, cranking the ignition. As I pulled away, I looked in the rearview mirror. The others were also scrambling into their cars, tires squealing as they sped off in different directions. And then, standing silhouetted in the open doorway of the silent house, I saw a figure. Tall, impossibly thin, dressed in what looked like a dark, old-fashioned suit. It didn't move. It just stood there, looking at the road where the 5 cars had just fled. As I turned the corner, I saw it raise a single, elongated hand and slowly, deliberately, touch the frame of the door. I drove until I hit the interstate, my chest heaving. I never told Sarah the full story, only that the seller was a creep. The thing is, I know that it didn't select the chosen. The people in the room knew their names were on that table before they arrived. They were already part of this horrible transaction. The question I can't shake, the one that keeps me looking at the missed connections, is this: if 5 names were already carved into the wood, and I saw 4 other people in that room, then who was the 5th one, and why did it post the ad for a table that was clearly already claimed? I don't talk to my older brother, Jason, anymore. It's not because of a fight about money or family drama. It's because of a message he sent me exactly a year ago, containing nothing but a low-resolution photo of a child's rocking horse and the text, "The sitter never showed." That horse, an old, painted wooden thing with chipped eyes, was the last thing he ever tried to sell on Craigslist. Jason and his wife had just moved to a tiny coastal town in Maine. All jagged rocks, foggy harbors, and silence. They were trying to get rid of the last bits of their city life, and one of those bits was a high-end, custom-built sauna they'd installed in their basement apartment in Portland years prior. Moving it was a nightmare, so Jason posted it for sale. Cheap, luxury 2-person cedar sauna. Disassembled. Free if you haul it today. The ad went up at 11 a.m. The reply came almost instantly, from an account with the email thecollector404. The message was terse: "I will take it. Tell me the address and when I can pick up. I bring tools and help." The address was given, and Jason mentioned he was out of town for the weekend, so he'd leave the key under the mat and the disassembled sauna parts stacked neatly in the garage. His instructions were clear. Cash payment of $200 taped to the washer, just to cover his moving costs. And please, send a text confirmation when done. Jason got the text confirmation about 6 hours later. Sauna removed. Thank you, but there was no text about the payment. When he got back home on Sunday night, the house was silent and the garage was empty. The cedar walls, the benches, the heating unit all gone. He went inside. The cash wasn't on the washer. Instead, taped neatly to the front of the dryer, was a small, white square of paper. On it, written in sharp, almost elegant script, was a single word: access. Jason was furious. He emailed the collector 404, accusing them of theft. The reply was immediate: "I paid. The terms were met. Check your inventory." Jason went through the house again. Nothing was missing, except the sauna. He sent a final, threatening email, demanding his $200. The collector simply replied, "Look harder." The exchange is complete. That night, Jason couldn't sleep. He kept feeling a subtle, intermittent coldness drifting down the hall from the kitchen. Around 3 a.m., he got up and went to the kitchen. The back door, which he'd double-bolted, was now unlocked, slightly ajar, rattling in the light sea breeze. He secured it, confused, and went back to bed, chalking it up to his own absent-mindedness. But the next night, The back door was open again. This time, he noticed something new. The high shelf in the pantry, where they kept things they rarely used, had been rearranged. The stack of old cookbooks was no longer flush with the wall. It had been pulled out by an inch or two, and a single cookbook was resting on the counter. It was The Joy of Cooking, opened to a recipe for beef Wellington. His wife hated beef Wellington. Over the next few weeks, the small, unsettling signs continued. The back door would be found unlocked almost every night. Objects would be subtly moved. A pair of reading glasses, always kept on the bedside table, would appear on the mantelpiece. A single sock from the laundry basket would be left dangling from the kitchen faucet. Nothing of value was ever taken. It was just a constant, low-frequency intrusion. Jason realized the access the buyer had purchased wasn't the cedar planks of the sauna. It was access to their private, secured space. The house. Then things escalated. Jason found a small hand-drawn map tucked inside his briefcase. It was a crude layout of their home, but with certain areas circled in red: master bed, office, basement storage, and beneath the map, written in the same elegant script as the original note, "I need the attic." Jason felt a sickening wave of certainty. The collector wasn't interested in stealing. They were interested in using the house, establishing a secondary phantom tenancy. They'd exchanged the bulk of the sauna for the access. The final incident was the rocking horse. Jason had posted it on Craigslist, a sad, last-ditch effort to offload more clutter. He came home one Tuesday to find it sitting in the center of the living room, even though he'd left it in the corner of the garage. It had a fresh, bright red satin bow tied around its neck. That night, Jason slept fitfully, constantly aware of the silence. He woke up abruptly, sure he'd heard a faint sound, a low, rhythmic creaking. It wasn't the wind. It was coming from downstairs. Heart pounding, Jason crept out of bed and descended the stairs. He paused at the living room doorway, gripping the frame. In the pale glow of the street lamp outside, he could see the rocking horse, and it was rocking, slowly, steadily, back and forth, entirely on its own. And perched on the edge of its saddle, a small, dark object that hadn't been there before. He took a shaky step closer. It was an antique silver locket. He recognized the elegant script immediately, etched faintly on the back, "For the wait." Jason didn't touch it. He backed away slowly, went upstairs, woke his wife, and told her they were leaving. Now, they abandoned the house that night. They never went back. Jason deleted his Craigslist account and cut contact with anyone who might try to locate him. The last message he sent me, before blocking my number, was that picture of the rocking horse with the text, "The sitter never showed." I never knew what he meant by it, until I looked up that coastal Maine town. The local legend is about a woman who traded her possessions for safekeeping in her own house, only to find the people she traded with never left, just waited for her to go. I realized the collector wasn't selling an item. He was buying a place to stay, and the rocking horse was simply a placeholder, waiting for the next thing to be collected. I've spent the last 6 months trying to convince myself that the ad was a prank, a dark joke posted by someone who knew too much about my life in rural Montana. But the joke had a body count, and I was supposed to be number 3. It started with an impulse buy. My truck needed work, and I was scrolling the free stuff section on a Monday when I saw it. Free workshop manuals. Must take all. Late 70s and 80s models. Pickup in Red Lodge. The address was an abandoned logging mill outside of town, a place locals avoided because of the pervasive, sulfurous smell from the old processing tanks. The instructions in the ad were sparse. Gate is open. Boxers are on the loading dock. Take them and go. I drove out there late that afternoon, kicking up dust on the gravel road. The air was cold, the sky already turning bruised purple over the peaks. The chain-link gate was indeed open, flapping slightly. I pulled up to the enormous, weather-beaten warehouse. The manuals were there, stacked in 4 large, water-stained cardboard boxes on the loading dock. I opened the first box. They were exactly as advertised, grease-stained guides for everything from Chevy Novas to Ford Broncos. I started loading them into the truck, but as I lifted the third box, I realized it was heavier than the others and felt oddly dense, like it was packed with sediment. When I reached the final box, the one on the bottom, I noticed something strange about the ad. It was still up, but the title had changed. It now read, "Free Workshop Manuals. Must take all. You know the rules." I drove home and stacked the boxes in the corner of my garage. It wasn't until I started sorting through this strange, heavy box the next day that the dread truly began. Underneath a thick layer of obsolete maintenance guides, I found a stack of composition notebooks. Not new ones, but spiral-bound books filled with cramped, looping handwriting. They were ledgers. Each page was a meticulous log of dates, times, and vehicle descriptions, but instead of services rendered, there were notes like 79 Datsun pickup, broken headlight, observed at 14 o'clock, driver unaware, or 84 Oldsmobile Cutlass, cracked windshield, target located, approach pending. These weren't mechanics notes. They were surveillance logs. I threw the book back in the box, my heart racing. I pulled out another notebook. This one was different. It contained a list of names. Short, specific, first and last names, written in the same precise hand. Next to each name was a license plate number, a town, and a chilling designation, removed. There were 2 names on that list, to people who were now gone. I looked down at the third entry, the third name on the list, the one not yet marked removed. It was my name, Nathan Holt. My truck's license plate number was written next to it, Billings Mount. I felt the blood drain from my face. The ad hadn't been about the manuals. It had been about the list. I had physically retrieved the ledger containing my own death warrant. Panic set in. I drove straight back to the abandoned mill to ditch the boxers, but the chain-link gate was now locked tight with a heavy new-looking padlock. I didn't dare go back to the house. I drove 4 hours, throwing the boxers into the back of my friend's empty storage unit near Meulen, but the fear had taken root. The person who wrote that ad knew my vehicle, my name, and my town. They knew I checked the free stuff. They had delivered the final, dreadful piece of evidence directly into my hands. The next few weeks were a blur of paranoia. I changed my route to work. I slept with the lights on, and I constantly scanned my rearview mirror. One night, while sitting alone in my dark living room, I heard a noise, a dry, persistent rustling, coming from the garage. It was the sound of paper, hundreds of pages being shuffled. I crept toward the door, holding a heavy wrench. The sound stopped instantly when I was a few feet away. I waited, breathing shallowly. Then, a slow, deliberate tap against the interior garage door, like a fingertip testing the wood. Then another, then a third, softer one. I didn't open the door. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and called the police, whispering frantically about a possible intruder. They arrived 20 minutes later. The garage was empty. Nothing was broken, no sign of forced entry. But when the deputy shined his flashlight across the floor, he found something taped to the concrete near the door, leading into the house. It was a single sheet of paper, ripped from one of those composition notebooks. The elegant handwriting was unmistakable. It read, "You should have taken them all. That was the agreement. Now you owe." Underneath the note, a small square photo was clipped to the paper. It was a picture of my truck, parked in my driveway, taken in the dead of night, and lying on the driver's seat, visible through the windshield, was one of the workshop manuals I thought I had gotten rid of. The heavy one, the one marked chosen. I hadn't taken them all. I had left one behind, and now the seller was collecting on the debt. I sold the truck the next day and moved out of state a week later, burning everything I'd brought back from the mill. Now, I live in a different state, drive a different car, and never check the classifieds. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right down an empty street, I hear that dry, quiet rustling, and I know someone is still out there, organizing their list, patiently waiting for the next free stuff post to draw in the new, unsuspecting name.